Okay, so today we're going to start a small project. It's a ceiling. It's got two recessed seams in it, and it's got 3 butt joints. So we're going to show you how we're going to fast track this with mesh tape and DRYWALL, and then we're going to get that first coated, get it bedded in, get a nice fill of the recess, a double coat on the butt joints, and we'll get ready for another coat for tomorrow. But today we're going to start by showing you how to prep the joints and how to get mesh on them and how to get the mesh bedded in with DRYWALL. Okay, so we want to prep these butt joints, and what I mean by that is we want to make sure all the loose paper is off, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll cut a little V groove in the butt joints, and that helps us in the process. It gets rid of the loose paper, keeps from any kind of blistering underneath the tape. So basically I just take my knife and I just trim it up a little bit. Maybe we can zoom in on this and I can show you a little bit what I do. So all I do is just cut that loose paper off and a little bit of the drywall. So we have a V groove there, and then this butt joint will be prepped. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, so basically that's all you have to do to prep a butt joint. You don't, if there's no loose paper, you don't have to worry about it too much. But in this case, there's a little bit of loose paper, so I just wanted to cut that out and V that in. So I'm going to move on to the next butt joint. Okay, so I also want to prep the rest of the ceiling for my taping and finishing. And you find that we got a bad spot in the drywall right here. So I'd already cut a little bit out. So I'm going to cut this out, and you just take your knife and you just cut that off of there. Just clean it up a little bit, get the loose paper off, and basically we're going to pack that with some stiff DRYWALL. I'm just going to mix a little bit of DRYWALL to pack some of this stuff, and that was about it. There was a couple little spots, like this spot right here. I cut that little spot out because it was a bubble, and you don't want that underneath your tape or your mud because it'll show through even after you paint it. So now that I have the ceiling prepped, there's a couple other little spots like this that I cut out. I'm going to mix just a little bit of mud, and I'm going to show you how we pre-fill this. Okay, so I'm going to mix some quickset mud DRYWALL. I have DRYWALL 45. I would probably prefer to use DRYWALL 5 here because it's not going to be too much work and I want it set up fast. But I'm just going to mix a little bit to do my pre-fills, where I V'd out that butt joint and where I cut out that bad drywall. So I'm going to show you how I do this. I'm just going to do a little bit of measuring, and normally we go to a 2x1, 2 parts powder, 1 part water. And so I'm going to do just a little bit of water, and I'm going to add that first. And we're going to have about 4 ounces of water in there. So I'm going to put it in my pan. I'm going to kind of dry that out a little bit because I'm going to scoop the mud with this as well. So I just want like about 12-ounce measure of powder in there. So it's not a lot. Here's my DRYWALL. Okay, I take a couple times to get what I want. Okay, one more time to just get a little bit more. Okay, so that's what I want. So I'm just going to sprinkle this in there, just like that. So that it settles good. Now, some people mix it with a knife, and I could do that. I could just mix that with a knife. I'm going to use a drill, and this is a paint mixer. I find it works really, really well to mix DRYWALL, especially in the pan. So I'm just going to get that wet, get all that mud into that water. And we need a little more water, so I'm just going to use just a little bit. Just pop a little bit more water in there just to make it, get it all the way we need it. You can tell I start the drill slow. Then I just work the mud nice. Back and forth with my drill. And once it's all wet, then that's pretty good. I'm going to check the consistency in a minute. And all I do is turn my drill on in the water, and I clean that up pretty nice, because you don't want it sitting on the bit. So now I'm going to take my 6-inch knife, and I'm just going to make sure all the powder's out of the corners. And that worked really, really well. So now I'm going to take this mud and I'm going to pre-fill this, so if the camera can follow me, we're just going to see how this happens. Okay. So we're just going to get that mud and I'm going to pack it in there. It doesn't need to be pretty. I just want to pack it in there, clean it up. I'm going to do this one. We don't want ridges. Okay, so that packs that. With the butt joint that I V'd out, I like to just pack that as well. Okay, and I want to show the one that I really V'd out. Okay, so I just put a little bit on my knife, and all I do is I just pack that mud in that little V, and then I clean it up. I clean it up. I don't want any ridges. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to put tape over that anyways. Clean it up, pack it in there, clean it up. Okay. So maybe we can get a close-up of what that looks like now. And I'm going to do the same with this little thing right here. Just fill that. Now, because we have time for this to set, I want to show you how a do-it-yourselfer should spot these screws. Okay, and I've got a couple screws right above me, and then I'm going to have my assistant, who's learning how to do this, spot a couple screws as well. So when you have these screws, basically I just put a little mud on my knife. I don't know if you can see that, a little mud on my corner. And I just dab that, clean my knife off, and wipe that off. Now you've got a little mud left. So I dab the next one, wipe it off. Dab the next one, wipe it off. Right, so with that, let's watch my assistant do this. And we're just gonna focus on a couple screws here because I've been teaching her how to do this. Let's see how she does. So let's see how you put the mud on the knife. So there's just a little bit on the corner. Now go ahead and spot those screws. Excellent, excellent, very good. So the key is to make sure there's no ridges. Thank you, Amber, you did a very nice job. So no ridges. You get a nice Durabond fill in those screws, and that's a good start on this ceiling. So now as a pro, having done this for a long time, I don't spot the screws this way. What I do is I put mud on my knife like this, and I spread the whole series of screws. Okay, so I can do that relatively quickly. So, and as I walk across the ceiling, okay, that's how I spot the screws. So the difference between someone learning, does this do a less quality job than this? Absolutely not. The key is just take your time, don't leave ridges, so it's easy to sand, and get the screws spotted. Right, so now we're going to start applying the mesh tape. The Durabond is basically set, and now we're ready to apply the mesh tape. We have 3 butt joints. We're going to do those first. And I'm going to do this first one. You should be familiar with mesh tape. It's got a self-adhesive on the one side. I am using a tape roller to hold my roll of tape, just because it makes it a little bit easier. But you got to be careful with it when you're using it with mesh tape. But see, it allows you to do this. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pressure here and seat that in really nice. And then I'm just going to follow along, move it along, seating it in, and then I'm going to cut it just like that. And then I'm just going to seat that in with my hand to make sure that it's all sitting. And if you need to, you can adjust it a little bit, just like I just did, so that there's no bubbles. Okay. You can use your knife to seat it in there nice. Okay, so now that's going to be ready to put DRYWALL on it. Now, I want my assistant to do this, as you would if you're just a do-it-yourselfer or you're just beginning. Very good. You don't have to stretch quite so far, but you can get that seated in there. There you go. There you go. Just be careful because you're working on the bench. Okay. So just so you know, Amber hasn't done this very often, so she's just learning as she's going. So it's just typical of anybody else who would be doing their own project and not having a lot of experience. Okay, so that's ready for mud. Okay, so now we have the butt joints done. We're going to go to the flats. All right, and these are the recessed factory edges. So basically, you just want to take your time. You want to be able to put it up there, a little bit of pressure, and flatten it out. A little bit of pressure, flatten it out, and then you can just keep. See, that's all that takes to get that ready for bedding. So I'm just going to walk across. Okay, and that's as far as I can go. So I'm going to trim it, make sure it's seated, and then if we can have our assistant move my bench for me so I can get the rest of this seam. All right, so now I'm going to mix some DRYWALL 90. We're going to bed all this mesh tape, and we're going to fill in the recess and get it ready for a coat. Okay, so here's my DRYWALL 90. This is the material I use. It's what's very common in my area, but you can use any other kind of material. There's a couple different manufacturers. But what I do is I don't like to just rip up the top. I don't like to rip it up and open it at the top. I like to use a pair of scissors and cut it square. And the reason why is because it's easier for me to get the mud out. This can get rather messy, okay, because the powder can go just about everywhere. So I just use a pair of scissors or a utility knife, and I just cut the top off, and I can seal that and close it by rolling it up later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix. I don't want to mix the whole bag. I just want to mix a certain portion of mud. So I'm going to mix it in a little white pail. All right, and I'm going to get about. I'm going to fill this up 4 times, and then I'm going to fill it up with water twice. But before I do that, I'm going to do the water. All right, so actually it's about 48 ounces of water that we're going to have in there. And then I'm going to get a rag, and I'm going to dry that out because I'm going to dump the powder into it as well. And I don't want the powder sticking to the walls of the little cup here. So we're going to dry that out, and we're going to start scooping 4 of these into my white bucket. And we put the water in first so the mud can kind of assimilate into the water. Doesn't have to be exact, as you can tell. All right. So when you saw in the pan, I used a little paint mixer, little cone mixer. With the white bucket, I use this kind of mixer, okay, because it just gets the side of the buckets better. So again, I'm going to get it in there, and I'm going to slowly get that mud assimilated into that water. Okay, so I need more powder because it's too thin, and I'll just do that one container at a time. And now I mix it up pretty good. And that looks like it's a better consistency. It might still be a little thin. I might put a little more powder in, but that's okay. And I do want to put a little more powder in it. It's still just a little thin. Not much though. Not too much. So I'm just going to sprinkle that in there, and we're going to mix that up. Okay, so see it still dripping, so it might still be a little bit thin. So I'm going to put a little more mud in it, and I'm going to mix it in as I go. Okay, so let's check the consistency. It might still need a little more powder, but I'm going to use my knife to get it out of there. And it is pretty drippy, isn't it? I guess I used too much water at the beginning. Okay, so I don't think I want to use that yet, and we're okay. We can add a little more powder, and I'll still have plenty of time to work with the mud, and we're going to just thicken that up. Better to have it work right than have it too thin. All right, that's looking better. That's looking better. Just whip that up a little bit more, and then we'll be ready to start coating our ceiling. Okay, so that's not bad for a tape consistency. It drips a little bit, but it doesn't, you can still have a considerable amount on your knife. Stays on your knife. Okay, so it stays on your knife. Okay, so there you go. So I'm going to set up, and we're going to start showing you how we bed this mesh tape. Okay, so now we got our mud mixed up, and we're going to bed our tape. Now there's two different ways you can do this. You'll notice I have two tools. Number one, I use a pan. I don't use a hawk. I use a pan. It's just easier for me. That's how I learned. And I think it's really easier for most DIYers as well. People who are doing it themselves, it's easier to use a pan. I use a stainless steel pan with welded joints. So it's a good quality pan. And then I use my 6-inch knife to put the mud on, my 8-inch knife to wipe it clean in what I'm going to show you. So some people just use their 6-inch knife, and here's what they'll do. They'll just put mud on the tape, and then they'll just wipe it off, and you just have a simple bed of the mesh. And that's really all you really need. But I want to fast track this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple minutes and I'm going to show you. I spread my mud like this. I put mud on the corner, and then I spread it like that. Okay, now it's all in the pressure on the knife. That's how I would do it. I don't put a lot of pressure, just a nice steady pressure on the knife. All right, and I'll explain to you why I do it this way in a minute. I take my 8-inch knife and I just clean it up just like that. Okay, and the reason why I like to do that is because it fills that recess in really nice. I don't wipe all the mud out, and so when that sets, I'm ready for a coat of regular mud. So if I wipe it all out, I'm going to have to put another coat on anyways. So that's why I do that. Now, for somebody who's just beginning, or they're trying to do their bathroom, or they're trying to do a basement something, they're not going to be able to spread the mud like I do. Just get a little bit of mud like that, and just try to get it on that recess, right? See, it's almost about a 6-inch cover, and just spread it like that. You don't have to worry about your edges being straight, okay? And then after you get your mud in there, then you can take your 8-inch knife and you can wipe it out. See, it looks the same, okay? So that's what I do with it, and it puts a nice first coat. Not only does it bed the tape, but it puts a nice first coat on there with very minimal shrinkage. So now we're going to speed this up so I can get these seams done, and then I'll show you what I do with butt joints. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I do butt joints. And again, this is to try to fast track through the job and do a good quality job as well. So I'm going to use my 6-inch knife. And again, how I would spread it would be like this. How you can spread it, it's just a little bit on the edge of your knife, and then you can tap it in like this. Okay, either way is fine. Okay, then I'm going to take my 8-inch knife, and I'm just going to spread that out. And it's true on the seams as well. You don't want edges, so you want to make sure, we call that feather. You want to feather those edges out, or just take the ridges off, and just make sure, work that into that there. And that's basically what we do. All right, so that's a butt joint. I've got 2 more butt joints to do here, so we'll see you when we're done with those. Okay, so I finished all the butt joints. So as we take a look at the ceiling, we've got 3 butt joints, and I've just got it down the middle, right? Because when I come here next time, because we're done here for the day, when I come here next time, I'm going to put a coat on each side of these butt joints and 1 nice coat right down those seams. All right, and I put another coat on the screws. So that's all we're going to do here today. We'll let this set up and dry, and I am going to get this done in a day or 2 less than I would normally do had I used just regular +3 or topping or taping mud out of the can. So I like to fast track it with DRYWALL.